Hey everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, back again with a second installment of lovely wrestling news. If you haven't seen Tom's video already on the channel, do check it out to see a whole host of different types of wrestling news. And now we have a second load of headlines to crack on into. Also, apologies if the setup's a little bit weird. That shadow's quite severe, I can see that already, because I've set this up myself. The light's over there. I'm learning and it's going fine. Yeah. Anyway, we'll just see how it goes. I think I'm in focus, so that's a good start. And let's just crack on with those headlines. So first of all, it has been said that virtually everyone in WWE has at some point been in touch with AEW. Next up, a top New Japan Pro Wrestling star is set to make his return. And finally, a title match has been announced for WWE Payback. So first of all, let's talk about this big statement that's been making waves quite a lot on the wrestling social media sphere, as it were. The rather controversial suggestion, or it's been treated as if it's controversial, I should say, that virtually every top guy in WWE has at some point spoken to AEW. Who's the source on this? It's bloody Dave Meltzer, isn't it? You knew it would be. He was saying on his Wrestling Observer radio show that virtually everyone in WWE has indeed contacted AEW. Now, he was responding, first of all, he was giving his thoughts, I should say, on Chris Jericho's dream top 5 people he wants to see in AEW. And in case you missed it, that top 5 was Kota Ibushi, Ricochet, Will Ospreay, Don Callis, and Roman Reigns. And it's Roman Reigns where this whole thing sprouted from. So Jericho was saying he would love to see Roman Reigns in AEW, obvious reasons. Roman Reigns is a massive deal, he's going to get eyes on the product, that sort of thing. But then Dave Meltzer did that thing where he kind of answers a question which is clearly just hypothetical or facetious, and he answers it quite at face value. He answers it very straightforwardly, as if it were an actual question posed to him, and in doing so he gave rise to a much bigger talking point than I think he intended. But Meltzer said Roman is not going to AEW, not happening, even though Jericho wasn't saying that, he was just giving his top. Anyway, the point is, Meltzer was just saying that. Nice one, Dave. He says also, virtually everyone in WWE, including guys who have claimed differently, at one point or another have called up people in AEW trying to see what they can get or have had interest. But Roman Reigns, and there's a couple of others, but Roman Reigns was basically, of the top guys, the only one who never even inquired. So he ain't going anywhere. So you see what's happened here, don't you? You see that in trying to illustrate a point, basically, with Meltzer saying, trying to emphasize just how little the chance is of Roman Reigns going to AEW. He's tried to make that the talking point and has accidentally said something which is a much bigger talking point, like easily a much bigger talking point than Roman Reigns never going to AEW. He said Roman Reigns isn't going to AEW because out of all the top guys, he was the only one who wasn't even interested. And now obviously everyone's gone, what, you mean everyone else was interested? Now obviously some people haven't really liked this. Some people have said, well, it's stupid because obviously someone like Brock Lesnar is probably not going to have shown interest in AEW. But I guess who do we count as a WWE top guy these days? Has it got to be someone who's regularly appearing? We know that Randy Orton was potentially flirting with them on social media. Maybe Meltzer suggesting that people who've claimed otherwise is a bit of a hint towards Rollins, maybe, who is, such a flag bearer for WWE these days on social media. I don't really know. It's a strange one, but it's obviously one of those statements that just everybody has jumped on because it's so inflammatory, like, wow, every top guy in WWE, virtually every top guy, apart from Roman Reigns, has been in talks with AEW, even on more of a casual basis. It's quite a startling thing to suggest. But then again, just assuming that it's true or somewhere near the truth, should it be that startling? Because, we don't see the side of wrestling that goes on where like everybody's interconnected. People in AEW and WWE will still be close friends with each other even though they now work for totally opposing companies. They'll text, they'll whatever, there'll be group chats with guys in from both sides of the divide and everything, and it'll just all be way more connected than a lot of us are willing to admit as fans, or a lot of us are even able to comprehend as fans. So maybe it's not totally inaccurate to say. Maybe there is some truth to it, and maybe, maybe that's just the way it is. I don't know. I'm not the one to say, but I do suggest that maybe if we take talking to AEW as like very informally, with like no real hope of securing a move there, just to see how much you'd be paid, then maybe there has been a lot of discussion between top guys in WWE and people in AEW. I don't know. What we have learned from this story, basically, the only concrete thing I think that we can say we've learned, is that AEW is incredibly well connected in the world of wrestling for such a claim to even be made by Meltzer. And to be even somewhat taken seriously, which it has been. And I think that it's not a big talking point or new information that AEW is very well connected, because they've got Cody, they've got the Bucks, they've got Kenny with his Japanese connections. It all makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? But, we knew that, and this seems to sort of fortify that argument a little bit more. Let me know what you think. I'd be very curious to know what you think of this story in the comments section down below, because it's a weird one, isn't it? How accurate do you think it is, and how valid do you think it is as a talking point? Right, next up, a big star is about to make their return to New Japan Pro Wrestling. This was announced on their recent New Japan Pro NJPW Finish Strong series on YouTube, which is basically a recap of their Strong shows, which are taking place in the States, involving, of course, the US version of the New Japan Cup recently. But it's not just match repeats or highlights that are shown on this YouTube channel. Also, big announcements are sometimes made, as we learned this week when it was announced that Jay White, the ace of Bullet Club, will be returning to New Japan on the next edition of the show. Well, I say the ace of Bullet Club. Is he anymore? Because one of the things I'm most looking forward to seeing about Jay White again isn't just who he's going to wrestle next, what he's going to do, but it's going to be how does the interplay occur between himself and other members of his faction. Most importantly, Evil, the new boy, the champion, the double champion, the IWGP Heavyweight and IC champion, the guy who was basically taken Jay White's spot in the Bullet Club. How's that going to work out? Are they going to just get on like a house on fire? Or maybe not. But yeah, I'll also be interested, of course, to see who he wrestles next and what he does and who he sets his targets on and all that sort of thing. But yeah, I'm curious to see how the Bullet Club are going to hold up through this return. And speaking of Bullet Club members, Kenta, of course, has reached the final of that New Japan US New Japan Cup. Why have I said it like the US New Japan Cup? You know what I mean? I'm getting annoyed. Kenta's reached the final where he will face David Finlay. Finlay beat Tama Tonga in one semi-final. Kenta beat my pick for the winner of the tournament, Jeff Cobb, in the other semi-final. The winner goes on to face the IWGP United States champion, who I think it's accurate to say still, at the moment, if he's not been stripped of it, is still one Jon Moxley. So that means that at some point in the near future, hopefully, we could see Kenta versus Moxley or David Finlay versus Moxley. Out of the two, obviously, I'd rather see Kenta versus Moxley, but Finlay pulls it out of the bag sometimes in big matches and has history with that United States Championship, so I wouldn't be averse to that matchup either. So there you have it, Jay White is returning soon. Now let's talk about a whole host of returning folks, not to the real world, but to the video game world, because it's time to talk about WWE 2K Battlegrounds, and their rosters have dropped. I say rosters because there's two sets to the roster, basically. There's the base game roster with current superstars, and then there's the available after release section, which is more like, I guess, veterans of the 80s, old school legends, non-wrestlers, recently retired folk, and that sort of thing. And before I delve into the interesting names and also omissions from this roster, I've got to say that I have to give a big thanks to someone, either I think it may have been Tom or Aiden, one of our news team, basically, or whoever they got this from, this information. Whoever wrote this information down, thank you very much. You've made my job a lot easier, because they've split, like, obviously I'm not going to read out the whole roster because there's so many names on there, and you can find it online if you wish. But I think it's really handy that they've split it into these sections. So we've got release superstars who still made the cut in the game, I guess because of when development started. We've got first time in a while appearances who haven't been on a few WWE installments for a while now, and also glaring omissions. So we'll just run through all of those, I guess. So superstars who've now been released but have made the cut in the game are Alicia Fox, Curtis Axel, Gallows and Anderson, and also Eric Rowan. No word on whether the Spider is included or not. As for wrestlers who haven't appeared in a WWE video game in a while, we've got the Boogeyman, we've got Doink the Clown, Earthquake and Typhoon, Maurice as well, who hasn't been a wrestler in a game for a long time now, I suppose. Yeah, fair enough, Maurice, and Yokozuna as well. And finally, glaring omissions, again, I guess just because of when this game started to be developed. A lot of these people probably weren't even on the main roster. One of them still isn't on the main roster, but is a major name, who would definitely thrive because of his moveset in an arcadey situation such as WWE Battlegrounds. But anyway, we've got Lacey Evans, Angel Garza, the Viking Raiders, Matt Riddle, and the guy I was just talking about, Keith Lee. Now, obviously, everyone apart from Keith is now on the main roster, but at the same time, it would have been nice to see especially Keith on there. But I can't fault Battlegrounds if that's when the development started, before they were all more prominent names. I understand. Next up, let's go to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful.com, who has somehow procured, I think one of his sources just gave him it. I like the idea of him just being given it slyly in a back alley somewhere. It's a depth chart of baby faces on SmackDown. He's revealed basically who WWE value as their top 3 baby faces on the blue brand. And it's always interesting, isn't it? It's always interesting to see how these sort of things match up whenever they are leaked or released, how they match up with our own perceptions. Because of course, there could be some internet darling who just isn't given the love they deserve by WWE, Chad Gable, Cesaro as well, Nakamura. Anyway, and there's also people who work the other way, people who we might not necessarily realise are valuable ourselves, but whom WWE prize above most others. And it makes for very interesting reading. So let's just dive into it. Let's just have a look at the depth chart and see who SmackDown's top 3 baby faces are. We've got at number 1, Braun Strowman, at number 2, Jeff Hardy, and at number 3, a very new, relatively very new addition to the blue brand, Matt Riddle. Now I know you're thinking, I'm thinking it too, where's Daniel Bryan? Well, apparently Bryan was not included as a candidate for this depth chart because simply he wasn't a regular part of the product at the time. In fact, he was absent when this chart was reportedly made. I should also point out that this was apparently made before the most recent SmackDown tapings, which included last week's episode where we saw Braun Strowman not act like a big shining babyface and maybe even throwing in some heelish tendencies. Strowman, of course, press slammed Alexa Bliss and is embracing the dark side ahead of this rematch with The Fiend. He shaved his hair off to look even more menacing. I don't know what's going on with him, but when this was made, he was considered a full-on babyface. Can he be now? And if he is, I guess it's inarguable that he's number 1 because he is, of course, the champion. I'd like to see this sort of thing done with heels as well, and on Raw and on NXT and all sorts. I want to see what everyone thinks in WWE of the roster they've got on hand. One thing that I would say is strange, unless I've missed something, it seemed like only the top 3 were reported. Now, the fact that there's only a top 3 is quite concerning given the sheer scope of WWE's roster. It's so packed full of people, but I guess sometimes that's just the way it goes. Maybe they've got limited people they can utilize right now, given the circumstances. And moving on to our final story, a title match has been announced for the upcoming Payback show, which is not this Sunday, that's SummerSlam. It's obviously just the Sunday after it. Just a 7-day, casual 7-day gap, WWE. Thank you very much. The match concerns the women's tag team champions, Sasha Banks and Bayley, who will be defending their belts at Payback, but we don't yet know the identity of their challengers. What we do know is that it's a very busy couple of weeks for Sasha and Bayley because this weekend at SummerSlam they are of course defending their respective individual titles against the same challenger, Asuka. Asuka is facing both Sasha and Bayley for the Raw and SmackDown belts respectively. How did that happen? If you've not been following along, I'll explain. Asuka beat Bayley on Raw, which secured her a number 1 contendership against Sasha Banks. That title shot will take place at SummerSlam for the Raw Women's Championship. Then she won the Tri-Brand Battle Royal on SmackDown to also secure a SmackDown Women's title shot against Bayley. So she's got 2 title shots on the same show against different women. It's all kicking off. I don't know what to expect. It's gonna be good. Why am I talking in this cadence? I'll stop now. But then the week after, of course, Sasha and Bayley will, regardless of who's still holding on to their belts or not, they will go on and basically defend their tag titles against whoever. We don't yet know at Payback. And because Payback is so soon after SummerSlam, I'm really concerned that basically there is not going to be a lot of clean finishes at SummerSlam. I'm guessing most of the card will feature clean finishes, but to have another pay-per-view or network special so soon after the first, there's got to be some screwy finishes to set up some rematches, right? You've only got 1 week of TV to write everything in. You're going to need to utilize SummerSlam in some way to set up Payback, which is wrong, but their schedule has now sort of demanded that it be that way. So very strange times, but then again, even outside the world of wrestling, it's been very strange times for most of 2020 now. So thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. Leave your thoughts and opinions on any of these stories in the comment section down below. Stay safe out there, stay positive, and I'll see you very soon.